Hey guys, what's up? Thanks for checking out Silent Shattered. Today I have a guest with a hell of a story, and we're gonna get right into it. Hey Chris, thanks for joining me for the first
Hi.
interview
Hi,
on
good
Silent
afternoon.
Shattered.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Appreciate you reaching out to me and everything, I'm very, I'm very excited to actually do this,
Right,
you
me
know.
too.
So
This is the
so
first interview, and it's gonna be dope because you're gonna be a great guest. So,
oh, thank you, thank you. I
yeah,
I just try to be me. That's it. That's
right.
it. Nothing more, nothing less.
Well, we follow each other on like all of our Instagrams, and I've watched, your progress and your videos and stuff for a couple of years now, probably maybe a year. And I was like, this guy is definitely like perfect to get on Silence Shattered. So, you ready to get
Wow.
into
Well,
it?
I really didn't know that it resonated that much out of me.
A lot of people, probably feel the same way watching your videos because they're just raw, uncut. You're not really necessarily
I don't
talking about mental health, but you know, it's
things
I
yeah.
just know more about you maybe than they do because we talk too. So
Exactly. So you're putting it more together about how I am, I
right.
know. Yeah.
So you ready to get started?
Yeah, sure. Let's go. Let's go.
All right. So I
Definitely.
wanted to start with your mental health journey. What's been the biggest challenge and how are you navigating it?
Mental health, period. My biggest challenge was honestly, it started when I was very young. Was I'm not here to talk bad about my father or anything like that. He wasn't a bad-hearted man, but he had issues. He
Mm,
gambled. He gambled a lot. So stability with me growing up was a big issue.
right.
Like like he would gamble like all the rent money and like we would have to like we would get evicted like when I was very young. So I was always losing everything and like no stability.
Right.
So that's where like it a lot of my problem it stemmed from like back then. I don't like to blame my father per se. It was just life. It was just a tough time. It was like the late 70s, early 80s. It was like, it was just like everybody seemed broke and we like it just wasn't a good time for a lot of people,
Right.
you
Things
know?
were very different back then too,
And we didn't live in the best neighborhood. We didn't live in this part of Brooklyn. I lived in downtown Brooklyn, which is a lot rougher and it's a lot more, it's different, it's a different world. And, and crack, I mean, it's when crack hit and we saw it firsthand. Like, I saw it firsthand as a little kid and that had an effect on me too.
Right.
Later in life, we're using drugs. Well, we'll talk about that after the fact. But
Right.
yeah, my journey definitely started with no stability. And while I was very young, dealing with anxiety already at like the age of like 10 years old.
Right. Yeah, not
But
even
not
knowing what's going on.
exactly. I had like no clue. I was like, why do I feel like this? I feel like my heart's gonna come out of my chest. And
Right.
for like it's because I was so worried that like, whatever my father was doing, like I was gonna lose something again, or we had to move, or whatever it may be.
Hmm.
Like it even got to the point where sometimes I don't even I say like we didn't even have nothing to eat. That's how much
Yeah.
my father gambled.
Right. That sounds
But
real
then
familiar.
But then you know what? He would, in some weird way, he would come out on top and he would hit a lot of money and things would be good for a couple of months, you know? But then like any gambler, just put it right back to it and the whole cycle starts over and over again. So I've seen this cycle start over and over before I even became a teenager. Before all
Yeah.
that, I was already like very like high strung. I was already upset.
Right. Yeah.
And listen, it's something I have to bring up because it's important that, in that age, we had to leave where we were living in Brooklyn. So we went to Queens with family that we have in Queens, and we were staying in Queens. I was 11. So from the age of 11 to 12, so like every kid back then, you go outside, you play with the kids in the front.
Hmm.
But I happened to hook in with a bad bunch of kids. There was a group home there. They were all delinquents. They all had been arrested before. Some of them were older. Some of them were like 16, 17.
Right.
And they were into robbing car radios.
Oh,
And they kind of like recruited me because like I was small, I was fast, I was slick, I knew what to do, like too. just from being from Brooklyn, because like we just knew certain things at a young age,
Right.
and I wound up being arrested at the age of 12 with a
Wow.
class D felony over $30,000 of you know, damage, whatever. I remember they took me into the precinct and they had the map and they had the thumbtacks in every little spot we were.
Oh my goodness.
I said, oh my God. I said, I'm gone. I said, I'm done. You know, this one lady, she was they sent me to a juvenile counselor and all that. I had to go see a lady. I was even under house arrest for about 6 months. I couldn't leave the house, couldn't go to school, nothing. I had to get homeschooled and all that. This one lady, she was my juvenile, delinquent, and she was representing me in court also. She just happened to take a liking to me, and she saw I had some good in me, and she saw that I was mainly influenced by the older guys
Right.
into doing this. And she actually called the last person that was really pressing a lot of charges, and she got him to drop the charges on me.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
great.
because and she kept in touch with us for a while. She really like took to me. It's like she like, is he going to school? It's like she made sure I went to high school because this happened in between eighth and ninth grade.
Mm-hmm.
So I missed like the beginning of freshman year,
Yeah.
and I had to start school in a different borough. I wanted to be with my friends in Brooklyn. It was just a lot of trauma back then. Man.
Right. And
It was always some sort of trauma in my life. I just can't, I just
yeah.
always wanted, I just wanted to get that out a little bit. That's something that, you go through, and you know what it does? It does a lot of bad things for you. Because you know what
Mhm.
it does? It gives you street cred. It gives you street credibility.
Right.
So now when you come out and you go back to school, all the kids are talking about you and this and that, and all of a sudden the older dudes are coming over and shaking your hand. Yo, what's up, little man? How you doing? You all right? You good? Everything's good? All right, good. And they went to my head, you know?
Yep.
Because I was so young, it went to my head. I was like, oh, I'm the man now. So from the age of like 14 on, I stood in that straight street life. Like I was just straight, we were just wild. We were just wilding. We were just wilding out back then. I was just really like getting over all the stuff with my father and everything and blah blah blah. And we were just going crazy. Like any other,
Yeah.
doing a lot
That's
of
an
stupid shit.
early
At a
age to get
very
started.
early age, at a very early age. That's the thing. That's the thing. That's why I have this thing for like younger dudes. Like I see that they could be easily influenced so like just like that. And they don't understand. Like I'm lucky I could have went away for like 4 years for what I
Right.
did. That was what I was facing, like 4 or 5 years. That would have just that would have changed my whole life.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
You know?
It's
Yeah,
so
so
important to like point out that a lot of kids are suffering from depression and anxiety and, ADHD, different cognitive issues. And in some cultures, in some families in the United States, like that stuff is frowned upon. So those kids don't get the help that they need, you know? So it's very
oh
important to
yeah,
think about
definitely.
like what your kids are going through, not necessarily blaming yourself, but keeping like an open dialogue with them. So, which is easier said than done. I don't have any. That's just how I feel I would do it.
I do. I do. I have a 30-year-old son. My son's 30 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, and um, we have this love-hate relationship. Me, after his mother passed away, I wasn't the best dad in the world. Like I said, like in my interview, like I said, I ran to the streets and I got like really, really involved into like the whole drug world and the whole street thing.
Right.
And I was just lost out there. I wasn't really taking care of what I really had to take care of, which was him at home.
Hmm.
Instead, I just leave him with my mom. Well, mom got him. He's good. But
Yeah.
that created so much distance between us over the years that to this day, it's sad to say, but he speaks to me, but like he's not the one to make the first phone call to me. Like you
Right.
understand? Like I have
Yeah.
to call him like 4 or 5 times before he even answers.
Yeah. Keeping his
I guess he's just
distance.
yeah, he distances himself from me, and that's something that does bother me. That's one regret I do have.
Yeah,
Is like, neglecting like, my responsibility of taking care of him, you
right.
know,
And that
because
on top of, early childhood trauma, like you just were, telling us about, that is a lot to deal with even as an adult, even 30, 40 years later. It manifests in all kinds of ugly ways, you know. So what do you do? What are your self-care practices to keep you grounded?
to keep me grounded,
Yeah.
wow. Well, look, listen, I wake up in the morning like what a pregnant woman explains, like what morning sickness is every morning.
Mm,
I wake up with tons of anxiety, and
ugh,
the acid in my stomach is like turning.
right.
So it's like instantly. So my mornings, I've learned to deal with it. I actually had to look up. I looked for a show on YouTube. I saw this guy. His name is. I'll send you a link. It's Andrew, whatever his name is, Dr. Andrew, whatever. And I was listening to him. I was listening to him every morning, every morning, every morning. He was telling you how to deal with your anxiety and stuff like that,
Mm,
no matter what the issue was. And it's not just always throwing THC at it, you know. It's
right.
not that. Like, what else I do? People think like, I mean, I do get up, I take a couple of drags and everything, but right after like, I have a little bit of coffee, whatever. I'm on the floor, I'm doing push-ups, you know, believe it or
Right.
not. Exercise. Exercise, it takes my mind over things and it changes the chemicals moving in your body.
Yeah.
It puts you in a different mood, period.
Yeah,
I found
that's
out like,
definitely a big one. Having a
yeah,
good morning routine too is clutch when you wake up with anxiety,
yeah.
because then you don't have to like wonder what you're doing today. You have
It
your routine.
I used to let it rule my whole. I used to let it rule my whole day until this guy was like, "No, you can't. No, no, no. Just get up, do something, avoid it, and it'll just go away on its own. You do some push-ups, you do or whatever it is you do. Or if you have to meditate, it's just I don't have the patience. You see, I'm a little high strung. It's hard for me to actually keep like to get into a deep state. Like I really have to be in like a really quiet area and like
Right.
away, like out in the woods somewhere, like
I
I
just read this book that you might like. It's called The Art of Going Slow, and I cannot think of the author's name right now, but I picked up another book immediately that he wrote after I finished this one because it's super easy to understand and relatable, and he breaks everything down for you as a way for you to like slow down your life because of like the busy, busy, busy culture, like the hustling culture, It's just a way for you to
yeah.
like live your life a little bit slower,
Instead
a
of
little bit
keeping up with the
easier.
rat race.
Right.
Instead of keeping up with the rat race, yeah.
And he gives a lot of tips about, self-care kind of stuff that you can do in order to change your routine to slow yourself down. So you might want to check that out. I'll put it in the podcast notes or the YouTube notes, so you can check it
Definitely,
out.
definitely, yeah. And you know what
Um,
else too? I'm sorry. Go
no, go
ahead.
ahead.
It's not too long ago, I'm gonna get too personal, but like, I had a certain friend, I would say an acquaintance, a good acquaintance. I wouldn't say a friend really. It's hard for me to call people friends like that. Like, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
But and that person has, suffers also from, but I had to realize I had to cut them off because their problems all of a sudden became my problems.
Mhm.
Like, instead of us talking about it, which I was more than glad to do, it was like being imposed on me. It's like, yo, can you help me with this? I'm like, I could barely help myself sometimes. Like,
Right. Yeah.
I said, I'm more than one to listen. I'll give you like a little insight maybe, but you know, I hate to say it, but it's your problem. I can't, really, you know,
Yeah.
I
I used
don't
to
know.
wake up like pretty recently, like maybe about 6 months ago. I would wake up in the middle of the night, like mid panic attack. Like the panic attack started before I even woke up. And I would wake up, and the only way I can describe it is that I felt like I was like a shook up bottle of soda with the cover on it. Like there was
Yeah,
just so much pressure. And so I started therapy, and it's a lot. Everything for me is trauma related, all the things I'm going through right now. So the therapy helped a little bit. But also this like whole idea of like getting myself out of the rat race, like you said, because I sold cars for a really long time, working like
Yeah.
120 hours a week. And so I'm like hustle. I'm a hustler, So I
Oh
had
yeah,
to
I saw
teach
that
myself
early
to
on.
chill
I saw that
out.
from your blog, from your other blog. I saw that early on. I said, "Oh, this girl hustles definitely." I could saw by the way you write so much. You like write big whole paragraphs like this big. I was like, "Damn."
Yeah.
You know?
That's just because that was the hip hop blog and like I just love hip hop, and I love putting on like indie rappers. So that
Yeah, me
was,
too.
that was fun and that's why I wrote so much. But yeah, like the slowing down thing, it makes a big difference. Like, and some people look at it as like if you slow down, then you won't get as much stuff done. Look at how much stuff I get done. Like firsthand like all the content I
Yeah.
put out, and I still like I live a much like calmer life because it was killing me. I had a nervous breakdown when I was 30.
Oh, I
So
had several. I had several.
yeah,
I've had several too. I know what you mean about putting pressure on yourself to do things. It's like I don't do that to myself either anymore. It's
yeah,
I can't. I do things at my pace. People still think I do things quick. It's just I do a lot. I could just multitask, but I don't know.
yeah. Well, I know
I
that,
just
you like you mentioned throwing THC at it. I try so hard not to do that until like the end of the day, like after I get all my shit done. But
yeah.
I know that you also are real big into music. So how does the music play a role in your healing process?
Well, how did shit play a role in my healing process? Wow. See, there's a lot of music I like I can relate to, not just hip hop. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like I'll listen to um what's her face? Imelda May or somebody else or just another obscure singer. You ever heard of Deep Banana Blackout? They're a funk band
No.
from Connecticut. Well, the singer Jen Durkin, she's like a really good funk singer. Like
Mm,
I listen to like really like offbeat like jam bands and stuff like that
right.
because I like the instruments. I like to listen to like live bands and stuff like that. So the music I play a lot of instrumental like live like like jam band music, like
Right.
that teeters on like rock and like house kind of and like ambient, like groups
Mm-hmm.
like Papa Doe, Slightly Stupid, all these jam bands, like from that's your offsprings of the Grateful Dead, like it spawned like that whole nation
Yeah. Like
of
Fish and like all, those
yeah, from
different
Fish on
bands.
down, and then when Jerry died, it became Rat Dog, and then Phil and
Yeah.
Friends and all that, and as you can see, like I have a big Grateful Dead tattoo on my arm because I actually followed
Nice.
them for a while. So I was into all types of music. It wasn't just hip hop. That's why people bugged out. They're like, "You're so much into hip hop, you get a Grateful Dead tattoo." I was
So,
like, "Have you ever been to one of their shows? Have you ever
right.
followed them?
I'm
It's a
like,
it's a complete lifestyle. You
yeah,
know,
definitely. Well, I
and
mean, I consider myself a pretty hardcore hip hop head, but my
oh, me
music that I
too.
that I make myself is like trip hop, like industrial type of music.
Yeah, I
So,
was looking for a genre for it myself. I was like, where would I put this?
yeah, it's like Portishead meets Nine Inch Nails. That's what I tell
What is
people.
that? It's not yourself.
So that's kind of like, my sound, but I love hip hop, and so it's people, most people listen to all different kinds of things. So, um, are there any songs or artists in particular that help you through your dark or like paranoid or anxious or whatever
Yeah,
moments?
Prince.
Prince.
Prince. Purple
Yes,
Rain. I could put it on Purple Rain and it could change my whole day.
really.
The
That's
whole album from
awesome.
beginning to end. When that album came out, my father always had a lot of records and things like that. So I remember he came on with a bunch of records. I said, this is weird and interesting at the same time. So I put it on. I was sold from the beginning. And he's like, no, that's the guy from the other record that sings 1999, the other song you like. I was like, oh, that's why he sounded the same. Like I didn't even know who he was. Like, and then Purple Rain came out, the movie, which I loved completely. And that's
Right.
another movie like I could put that on no matter what, watch it all the way through. Like, I was just infatuated with, and then I got really into Prince into his like his music career and like, how talented he was with, I mean, instruments he could play.
Right.
His writing was unbelievable. I know he came off as very weird and stuff, but if you look back on it now, he really put the industry out there at an early time, at a very early time, He
Definitely.
did, you know, he did have that cocky attitude too, and he did some weird shit, but I just like the guy.
Yeah. Apparently he was super good at basketball too. Like Charlie
Yeah,
Murphy
according to
said.
Dave Chappelle, blouses
Game
against shirts,
blouses.
shirts,
Exactly.
blouses.
I just watched that recently. That's why that popped in my
I
head.
watch it like almost every month. I watch things like that.
Yeah. I don't typically watch TV. I actually quit watching TV like probably 10 years ago, but I was at somebody else's house and they had on like the Charlie Murphy stories on YouTube, and I was like, this is awesome.
They
So,
those have me crying. Even my
yeah.
mother, she starts crying.
Yeah, he's
It's up to
funny.
recently, so I got back home like maybe about 2 years ago. I started watching TV again because my mother watches TV. Like I started watching. I got into like the show 911 now all of a sudden and this and that and like
Really.
I catch myself because like every week I sit with her and I watch the shows with her. Like.
Yeah.
So I gotta be into it. I gotta know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So
I get that.
there's a couple of good shows out there on regular TV or whatever that she likes.
Yeah.
So,
So,
hanging out with
aside,
my mom helps me a lot because, I could talk to her and she knows everything. I could just bring up the littlest thing and she always comes out with the most perfect thing to say.
yeah, that's good.
You
My
know,
I'm staying with
my
my
mom
mom
is
again
completely opposite.
too.
I'm sorry. I'm on my father. My father was high strung like this and I'm the Italian side, you know? My mother's Ecuadorian. My father was Italian.
Oh wow.
So yeah, so I grew up. Oh, that's another thing. Growing up mixed breed like that, half Spanish, half Italian. Oh my God, that was crazy.
Um,
Because like in school, they're like, "Are you white or Spanish?" Or I was like, "How about I'm a person?" Like,
right.
well, I
You
mean, like,
know,
what the?
I grew up in a really kind of shitty area in Boston, and my dad is Puerto Rican and my
Oh
mom's
wow,
family
really?
is Irish. So I had the same exact experience. Like
Wow, look at that.
I didn't really fit in anywhere because I'm like the whitest Puerto Rican chick you've ever seen, you know?
I would have never pegged you for Puerto Rican.
Yeah.
Never.
So
Maybe Cuban a little bit.
yeah, that's funny. But yeah, no, I totally get that. Like being, not an outcast, but people being like, what are you? Like, like
Yeah, I
the
used to get that a lot too. There's.
right. So I wanted to talk to you about the loss of your ex or your girlfriend or and
My
talk
son's
about
mother, my
yeah,
son's mother. Yeah.
talk about maybe talk about her passing and how it impacted your mental health.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. I remember it like everybody says, I remember it like yesterday. Like I remember down to like what I was wearing that day,
Wow.
the sneakers, my jeans, the jacket, everything. I remember like almost everything of that day. It's so uncanny that it's like, okay, how the day started was first off, she was 24 at the time. When we had my son, she was 17.
Hmm.
So she was a young mother. I was 20 at the time, 20, 21, so we were young parents, right? So for the first year of my son's life, like, we played nice, and my father, his friend hooked up with a great job. I worked in Manhattan, suit and tie on everything. And I was bringing in decent money and we were saving for an apartment, our own place, and for us and the baby, my son. But she was so young and she had her own issues. She's been through her own abuse,
Right.
you know, whatever, but somebody whatever, abused her when she was young, and she didn't have the drive in her to be a mother.
Hmm.
She thought at first she did, but honestly, she just didn't have it yet. and she suffered from depression at a different level that I never saw, and I really wasn't into that yet. I didn't really know.
Right.
Like, now I could go think back and now I say, wow, all those signs, all those warning signs she gave me, like, like she would like talk in her sleep, like have like nightmares and like,
Hmm.
and talk and like just like bad shit, like really bad stuff. And so whatever, like I said, she didn't really want to do the mother thing anymore and like live like the tie down life. She was 17, she just turned 18. She wanted to go out with her friends and like,
Yeah.
but she had a kid. So what she do one day, I come home from work. I was working night shift. I came home in the morning. She left me like the Dear John letter on the table. Oh, we got to break up and this and that. And we were living in her mother's house. Her mother owned the house, and we were living in an apartment in her mother's house.
Mm.
She was like, "So you gotta get your shit and get out." I was like,
Yeah.
"God damn!" I was like, well, who got to you? Like you know what I mean? It's like, and then a week after that, she takes me to court for child support because like one of her friends told her.
Uh,
But like I was like, I didn't even do nothing wrong. Like so, there was like animosity between us, like when we first broke up. And then like she got like a new boyfriend. Of course, I had problems with new boyfriend because I didn't want my son calling him daddy, you
right.
know? And like the dude was like, yeah, you can call me Poppy or whatever. I was like, no, 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 no. I said, you want to get
Yeah.
your jaw broken? I said, don't even think about it. I said, my son comes home calling me like you. I said, it's gonna be a big freaking problem. So I
Right.
always had problems with like a new boyfriend and this and that, blah, blah, blah. And this was like she took him back and forth. She would leave him with my mother for like 6 months because her mother worked a corporate job and was always working, so
Yeah.
she couldn't really watch him. And she would just go out. And she was like into car racing and motorcycles. And
Hmm.
she knew how to drive a motorcycle and actually she could drive a stick and she could race a car like you wouldn't believe. So she lived like this dangerous life. But like I said, she wanted to chill and everything. So she left my son with my mother a lot. So my mother like pretty much raised them on the most part, while she was
Right.
out there doing whatever, I actually hated her for it, for doing that. Like, yeah, she was leaving my son a lot with my mother. My mother always called my son. I mean, my son always called my mother Ma. Like, he knew her as his mom. Like, not that he
Right.
didn't recognize her as his mom, but he knew who was really taking care of him. My
Right.
son was very, and he was nothing like us, whatever. I mean, I just have to set this all up so you really understand the feel of it that we were broken up after this. And now let's speed it up a little, right? After we broke up and she'd been through her boyfriends and this and that. And what really got me was she wound up going out with a friend of mine
Oh,
that I knew since we were very young. I couldn't believe that he would even have the audacity to even, knowing that we have a kid together
right.
and everything. And he just completely had no regard for, I mean, like, we went, like, it went through the neighborhood that I was, like, on the move, like, looking for him to like, actually hit him with a bat. I wanted to hit him with.
Yeah.
I really did. I really did. And like, they stopped. They're like, yo, just leave him alone because you're going to hurt him for real and you're going to end up in jail, you know?
Right.
But, that's so yeah, we had animosity towards between us, like for like the first 3 years. Then comes like the fourth, fifth, sixth. My son is like 7 years old now. My
Hmm.
son's in the second grade, so she's 24 at the time, and we came to a truce, and we called a truce, and we said, listen, we're older now. You're older. You understand things a little bit better. I said, let's just be nice to each other for our son and show him
Right.
that we're not fighting all the time and this and that, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, you know what? I'm cool with that. We could be friends,
Yeah.
for once. And, it was cool. It was like, like we cool. I was like, oh shit, like, and you could tell like we were kind of like falling in love again on a different level, but whatever. But she was scared of that. She was just scared of that whole married life of being confined. So at the time, she wound up working with her stepfather owned a contracting company, and she was like, the office manager. So she had a great job. She wanted to buy a Lincoln Navigator. Wasn't of the year, but it was a new Lincoln Navigator that she
Nice.
always wanted. And this is what happened. One morning, I was living in this part of Brooklyn actually. already. And this was she lives all the way downtown, which is about like 40 minutes an hour away on the train from
Mm-hmm.
where I am. One morning I'm in my house, it's just me, my mom, my pops. I wasn't really like using then. Like maybe I was doing a lot of coke and stuff like that. Like I wasn't like putting needles in my arm yet and nothing like that. But my father and I we got into an argument that day from like say 10 a.m. till about 2-ish. We didn't stop arguing. We were just arguing about who I don't even remember what that we just used to argue about anything, you
Right.
know? And we were really going at it, like screaming and yelling at each other. My mother was getting nervous. So I said, you know what? I said, fuck this. I'm getting out of here. Excuse my language. I said, I'm gonna go see my son. I'm going downtown. Like, where my son is, he was in school. So it's just about that time that he was getting out. He get out at 3:15, right? So she would pick him up. Or the lady next door that lived in the next building would pick up all the kids and bring them home and make sure they got in the door. That was the thing we did out here. Well, I got to the house late. So like all the kids were already gone and like they had already school already dismissed. So he was already in the house. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
figuring he's in the house with her, right? So I come in, I go up the stairs. It's a walk up, like a 4-story walk up,
Yeah.
you know, railroad apartments, like them
Right.
type of tenements. And it was just so eerie out that day. It was dead in the street. It was a Tuesday in May. It was like overcast. It was slightly drizzling out. It was dreary. And I went over to the house, and I expected to see I came up the stairs. They lived on the top floor. So I was like, I had a lot of breath and stuff. And then I go to open the door. My son used to leave the door open because if he was home and she was home, they leave the door, and it was locked. Where's everybody? So I knock on the door. And my son goes, Dad, is that you? I was like, yeah. I said, open the door. What's wrong? He opens the door and he just has this white face on. And he looked over my shoulder. He goes, Dad, what is that? And I turn around. And you know the roof hatch with the ladder that
Yeah.
goes up? She tied a rope around one of the pipes and she tied the other onto her neck and she jumped inside. So she was hanging where the ladder was.
Right.
And I turned around and I looked, and it looked so surreal because she was so close to the ceiling, like the way it was, and the position of her neck was broke already. She was bleeding from her mouth. It wasn't pretty. And it
Right.
wasn't something for a 7-year-old to see. That's what really kills me, you know?
Yeah.
That really gets me is that my son had to witness all that.
Yeah.
To this day that you know, and not I was screaming. I got up on the ladder and I put her on my shoulder. She had knotted this thing up so good that nobody could get it off. It was like impossible. I had no knife. I put my son inside the apartment. I didn't want him to see anything else. So I didn't want to tell him, get me a knife from the kitchen. I gotta cut it.
Right.
So what did I just start doing? I started yelling, help, help, somebody help. I started yelling fire, everything, anything.
Yeah.
Finally, some lady in the building, like on the first floor, called the cops, said there was like an argument upstairs. They're yelling. So a cop just comes in like all casual. Oh, what the fuck's going on up there? I said, help, I need help. I said, she's dying over here. So the cops comes running up the stairs and shit. And she's like, holy shit.
Yeah.
I was like, please help me. Like I was like out of like my strength was gone. I was trying to hold her to relieve the pressure on the neck to like save her. Like I thought we were gonna save her.
Mm.
He got up on the ladder behind me and he had this big sharp knife and he cut her off finally. And we get her on the floor and he's like, move, move, let me work on her. And then he ripped her shirt open, he started giving her CPR, everything. And she had like a faint breath, but then she just let that cackle out. And I heard her breath leave and I knew right there. I said, she's gone.
Yeah.
And he stopped for a second. He moved, boy. He's like, I don't know what to say, man. He was like he felt like bad, like that he didn't save her.
Yeah.
I was like, it's not your fault, man. And the dude came over, he hugged me. He, like, he was like, "You're gonna be all right, bro. You're gonna be all right." I was like, I couldn't even comprehend the whole situation. That's how bad
Right.
it was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The
And
shock.
then what happened? My temper came through. I lost it because now the whole freaking precinct came, the fire department, the freaking battalion chief comes with the white shirt on, all these inspectors, homicide comes, big fiasco. I was just waiting for the news to come. That's all I was waiting for next. Like,
Right.
And so when they all got in there, I was just getting nervous because they sort of, the homicide detective was really grilling me because the first person they suspect is the next of kin in
Right.
a situation like that. So they don't know if it had something to do with it or whatever. I understand now, but I think he could have been a little bit resilient in the way he asked me certain things.
Right.
That even the fire chief told him, he said, "Whoa, calm down, bro. Look what you just been through." He's like, "Why are you grilling him like that?" And he's like, "You
Yeah.
don't know what killers do." I said, "Killers? Who the fuck? What did you call me a killer for?"
Yeah.
Like it was just like, so like that. And then I got pissed and I got up and I punched the door and it was one of them steel doors. I broke my freaking knuckle.
Mm.
That's why my hand is like this. That's why my hand is like that. I broke my knuckle bad.
Yeah.
Because I was so pissed. I was like so pissed at this freaking homicide. I said, the freaking nerve of you. You think I actually had something to do with this?
Yeah.
Like,
Just make a bad situation as bad and scarring as fucking possible. Excuse my
you know what the
language, you
worst
know?
was? You know what the worst was? Calling her mother at work and telling her what happened.
Yeah.
You know how hard that call was for me? Well, she said, "What?" She said, "What?" And she dropped the phone. I was like, "You got to be kidding me." You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I can't imagine. I honestly can't.
Even in the hospital, there's, two other girls that day hung themselves in Brooklyn.
Um,
It was so weird, almost the same age too.
huh.
And like one of them made the news, the other two they didn't want to. The news did come to me, and I said, I don't want this to be published.
Yeah.
I said, she said, I could write it. I said, listen, out of respect, can you not write it, please? You
Right.
know? I said, everybody knows what's going on. I'm not gonna, whatever.
Did they end up publishing it?
No,
No. That's
no.
good. They respected that.
Yeah, yeah.
I know that you've mentioned a couple times that you were already kind of sort of using, with the coke and whatever before that happened, but I know that there's more to the substance abuse story. And would you say that that was a big catalyst for what came next?
The biggest,
Yeah,
the biggest. That was the biggest thing. Because every little thing that I knew about drugs that comforted myself, I needed comfort big.
right,
I was hurting big time. And I was afraid to voice that shit out. I was afraid to get that out. Because, guys don't talk about stuff like that.
right.
Guys are tough. And guys do that. Now, when you go through that, man, I don't care who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I used to like lay in bed and cry just sometimes. Or sometimes I would hear a song that we used to like listen to. I
Yeah.
start crying.
I mean, that's so natural. That even
Yeah, I mean,
happens
really.
if you just
Like,
break up with somebody, forget about like, what you went through. So that's like to be expected for sure.
yeah.
Um,
So,
what was the point where you finally, decided that you'd had enough and you decided to seek recovery?
well, first of all, let me just start off like I said, like I was using like a little bit of coke, but within 3 months after I went to like me and my son went to immediate therapy
Hmm.
for all the stuff, for grievance and whatever. And I stood around for that. But right after that, I started smoking crack just for like
Yeah.
no reason.
Did,
And that's what started it. And that I found the comfort in that and the rush in that. And I was just like, oh well, fuck it. I could, you know, just do what I want to do, and that's it. I could do what I want to do because the world owes me. I said God owes me, the world owes me now, so I should have carte blanche with everything I wanted to do. And so I
right.
had this sense of self entitlement, and I was just completely on a different. I was on the wrong notion. So I got very selfish, and that's when I took off. I said, you know what? I'm just gonna go for where I'm just gonna go follow the drugs and keep on following it and following it and following it from state to state to state. I said,
Yeah.
screw everybody. I didn't want to hear nothing. Maybe I would call my house every 3 weeks, a month. Hey, I'm alive. I'll talk to you later. Hang up the phone. I literally used to walk around with death notes in my pocket. If you
Wow.
find me, this is my name. This is who you call, you know? We used to
Yep.
get up in the morning, like my crew of like little junkies, we used to write them for each other because some people were so sick in the morning they couldn't even write. So I used to write death notes for people. We used to say, I said, what a fucking depressing life we live, right?
Wow.
You know? I
Yep.
used to say what we were using, you know? I said, then
Yeah.
we're gonna come back in an hour, we're gonna use it all, and then 4 hours from now, we're gonna go out and go rob some more and go do the same shit again.
Right.
Just it just never ends.
I know. I for a good 10 years of my life, I was like a super party girl. Anything you put in front of my face, drugs, booze, whatever, I'd do it. But for like the last 5 years that I was using, I've been sober for like 13 years now. But for like the
Oh
last
wow.
5 years that I was using, I was in a heroin half coma all day long. You know what I mean? Like
Me too.
I have no recollection of those of those years, you
You know,
know?
I was in a program, and then I was supposed to go to this to another program, to another therapeutic community. And they were asking me, they said you had some suicide attempts. Because while I was high, when I used to get high, I used to get sometimes I get depressed. I'd try to do a lot more dope, or I'd shoot up just air, try to get air bubbles in me,
Yeah,
try to kill myself. Like, in like the little ways like that.
right.
And I forgot really where I was going with that because I just got lost in that.
That's okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
really, but
I mean, that trip down memory lane is not always easy, that's for sure.
no, it's not. It's not. And like you remember doing things like that. And then I remember, always when I was always younger, like, we grew up in Brooklyn. I grew up in a pretty rough neighborhood, and there was a lot of drugs. So
Right.
I wasn't that innocent. The first time I ever did dope was I was 17 years old.
Yeah,
Like, because I used to sniff a lot of coke, so my friend used to do dope. And he was like, yo, let's go to Manhattan. So you want to try some dope one day? I said, yeah, let's see what that shit's about, man.
right.
So for real funny story, really quick. We go to Manhattan. He gets in the car and he gives me the bag, and he's like, "I'm like, yo, stop, go back, bro. The guy beat us, bro. Look how much. There's only like a little bit in here. It's not like a dime of freaking coke. It's like a lot more." He goes, "Nah, man. It was just a little bit. That's it."
Hmm.
It was right because the dope was strong back then. We're talking
Right.
like 1991, like
Right.
90, like
It was
like
different.
real, like Tango and Cash just was out, like back then, like
Nice. Yeah, no, definitely like the dope
So
was different back in the day.
I was predisposed to it always, always. And then after a while you get when you smoke a lot of crack, of course that's why my nervous system is also messed up too. The paranoia
Mm-hmm.
that you get when you're even not high. And you start looking at me like, what are you looking at? This and that, and it really eats away at your brain like so bad.
Yep.
And that's it just I went through hell, man. I just yeah, I don't even know how it, by the grace of God, I have to say it, because I ended up in Florida, you know,
Mm,
and I was living with a girl in Florida and we were living nice, but I was functionally using.
right.
She knew it and whatever. And it all went bad. It all went bad in Florida, like really
Yeah.
bad.
That's what happens
Because
though. That
because
place.
the oxys were just coming out over there, so all the pain clinics were open. I lived right in Broward County. So
Mm-hmm.
if you know Florida, I live
Yep.
right by the Hard Rock house, right by the Hard Rock on State Road 7.
I've never
On the,
been to Broward County, but I know where it is.
oh, okay. Oh, I told me you have. 'Cause I remember you were in Florida once. I think
Yeah,
you told me.
I was in Southwest Florida.
Oh, okay. Okay. By Tampa or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, but over there, so while I was in Florida, I was doing a lot of the oxys because that was the
Mm-hmm.
thing because they were all over the place. And then also I had to go, I had to go into the hoods to get dope, to get heroin, because after a while the oxys weren't doing nothing for me. I was so
Right.
used to them. And things got really bad, because I met up with a crew from down there. I wound up getting into some beef. My boy went down there. He wanted to taking some stuff on credit on my name. When I went down there, they kidnapped me. They held me there.
Whoa.
They said, call your boy and get him over here now. Tell him we got a gun to you. Yo, they had a gun to me. They were like, yo, tell
Wow.
your boy to come back now. He says, you got to know where he is. You know where his girlfriend is, all this, that. So it was crazy, you know?
Yeah, that's, I
But in
mean,
Florida, I did a lot of, she was lenient. She understood about addiction because her first husband was alcoholic.
yeah,
So she understood about recovery and this and that. So, I was going to rehab and stuff. So I started putting myself in rehab detoxes and stuff like that, trying to get clean, to get back with her and to get better and this and that. And you know what? It just wasn't working. I would go get clean for 6 months, come back out and just start using again.
right.
And it just wasn't working. And what it took was she said, you know what? I'm going to put you on a plane and just send you back to New York. I can't deal with this anymore.
Hmm.
I said, you know what? It's probably for the best of me. I said, I get out of this fucking town. I said, I got to be someplace where my family is, where they could see me
Right.
and they know that, like, because I have cousins that are like my age that will come looking for me in the street, like.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I'd rather go home and feel safe. So when I came back to New York, I got on methadone like that. And so I
Yeah.
said, let me just go to the methadone clinic. I just got on methadone. But for like the first year or two, I was still using while I was on methadone.
Yeah.
It was so funny because I had a script for oxys, and if you had a legit script, you could get methadone and oxys. I was like,
Right.
"What are you saving?"
Yeah. I mean, that's like how people can get like, you know, Suboxone and Klonopin now. It's like, you just,
Do you know what that does to your heart rate? Do you know
I
how much
know.
that lowers your heart rate? You
Yep.
know how many people go to sleep and don't wake up from that?
I know.
With Seroquel and Xanax, they
Right.
give you now stuff like that. The Seroquel alone will knock out the elephant. You know.
Right. I know. I can't even take that stuff. I've been
Me too. They
prescribed
had
it
me
a
on it
couple
for a while. As you
times.
see, I lost weight because I exercise a lot now. But like I was like puffier. It was from all them. Like I was taking some like the Seroquel stuff. That's it. Put like 60 pounds on me, like
Yeah, it makes you want
nothing.
to eat.
Yeah,
Definitely.
that sounds like ice cream and like weird stuff. You start craving like chocolate and stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah, I put on so much weight. I was like, oh no, I gotta stop this. Hell no.
Right.
I don't know. I rather smoke a joint and get a little bit of the munchies and whatever, and that's about it.
Right. Well,
You know what?
I just want, we're running out of Zoom time again. Sorry,
Oh,
guys. But I want to
I'm
say
sorry. I get
that
into it
you're,
sometimes. I
no,
get
that's all
into it.
right, man. That was the whole point of the interview,
Yeah.
and you did a great job. Thank you for being so candid and, raw and just telling people what you've been
How it
through.
really went down. That's the only way to say it. I just want to say that to people, man. If you like one of your questions says, what advice would you give somebody that you know is struggling? You have to talk to somebody. You got to open your mouth. We can't read minds.
Right.
We don't know how things affect people sometimes.
Yep.
And it could be the
Yeah.
toughest, roughest dude in the world, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter, man, because we all people and we all got chemicals going through, we all got emotions, man.
Right.
Talk to somebody. Talk to somebody. That's the one thing, open dialogue, and then from there, things will start opening. And that's all I
Yep.
can say about that,
One
you
thing that
know?
I definitely learned when I was doing the hip hop blog for like the last 5 years, I interviewed like 300 indie rappers, and some of
Oh,
us
yeah.
became like really close and we would talk on Instagram and stuff. And one thing that I've learned that I didn't know because I didn't grow up this way is that Black men or, Latino men, they are discouraged from talking about that kind of thing,
Big time.
and it's like, just like the mental health stigma, they're embarrassed and they feel like there's something wrong with them, and so they don't get help. And the suicide rate in Black and Latino men is like skyrocketing.
It's ridiculous. You know what's funny that you brought that up? Because Illa G, all his new music is all about mental health.
Really?
The first track, as much about anxiety, because he has anxiety also. He's been talking about Sunday, he's been doing lives on Sundays about mental health also. So
Oh,
he's
really?
so he's come out in the forefront as MC talking about it. And he's actually putting it in his music. And
Yeah.
there's a couple other MCs that do it also. They're actually putting more mental health in their music and putting the message out about mental health, you
Right.
know?
Yeah. Kid Cudi's doing it, I definitely
You
took a lot of every chance I got that I could mix in mental health with the Never Nair blog, I would do that because I wanted to bring, to shine light on the fact that these men are suffering, and they won't even talk to me about it on like a personal level. Forget about like actually trying to get help, you know?
How do you break that stigma? It's like how?
I don't know, man. I know that like it's gotten a little bit better, over the last maybe decade or so, but it's just between like the media and cultural, stigma, all we can do is talk about it.
Yeah,
Sorry,
it seems like
guys.
that age that but at least I'm happy that it's addressed now. It
Yeah,
can't be just swept under the rug. But then again, it
right.
goes back to the whole big pharma wants to sell more antidepressants. So you know what? You're depressed because whatever. I
Yeah,
don't know.
that's true
It's just
too. There's more money in treatment than cures. You know how
yeah,
they say that. So,
yeah,
um,
definitely.
well, I just got the Zoom thing that we have 5 minutes
Okay.
left. So, but I want to say thank you so much for doing this. And to everybody that's watching the video, sorry that we ran out of time because this was really going really well, but Zoom is cheap with their minutes.
Yeah, they are.
So,
They are. So yeah, I know you have to end it. Thank you everybody for coming in. Everybody listening. I appreciated everything. And take heed to what I
yeah,
said,
I'll be
please.
talking to you soon.
Definitely. Peace. And much respect to you. Much
Thank
respect.
you. You too.
Great interview. I loved it.
Nice. Take
Peace,
it easy.
sister. One. Bye.